It's interesting because Caitriona, I think I told you, we did this piece last year, which seemed to go over pretty well. It was all open improv, and about 20 to 30% was structured as poetry. Did you ever see that piece?
I didn't see that piece.
I should give you it because we have DVDs on it.
Okay.
Um,
On the way to other what happens
Yeah.
on the way to other places?
and we thought it was pretty good. And it seemed that the audience responded to it. Some people didn't like it at all. But one of my students, Caitriona in LA, where I showed the video, said, I really hated that thing last year. Because it didn't ever go anywhere, And I realized, as much as I like open improv, when you've seen the open improv a number of times, worked pretty much in a vacuum, there's a certain kind of sameness that keeps coming through. It's different, but it's not that different.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it's not that different is because it doesn't go vertically. It doesn't get to the depth of what distinguishes one thing completely from another thing. It doesn't go deep enough to distinguish itself. It's almost like if you have a bunch of people starting off from the same center and they go off in 4 different directions. At the very beginning, they're very close to each other. But it isn't until time comes into play that you start to see the difference between that path and that path, because they get more and more separate from each other. So it's the same thing when you're working open improv. You're working mostly horizontally, going from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. You're not traveling the distance. That makes one thing so different from the other one. Like all 5 of our pieces were so different because we explored the depth of each one. Even though our exercises came on one level or another to play in all 5 of them. But when we started to bring the vertical movement in, the depth of it, and we started to build on it, then the forms of these pieces and the content of these pieces really distinguished each one from the other. And so when I was watching Bob and some of the happenings they were doing outside, and not being part of it, just watching it, like
The
people,
videos?
No, I'm watching them perform.
Oh, okay.
And where before I couldn't understand why after 10 minutes people would leave, I really myself started to get bored. I saw a certain kind of, even though it was different, it was still pretty much the same. Because a context was not provided where you would start to explore something, which had a life of its own. So I found that to be really interesting, that aspect of it. That open improv is good, but it ain't that good.
Well, it helped you get to where you wanted to.
No, as performance.
Oh, as performance, right.
It's a good tool. And to a certain degree, it's interesting as performance, but only to a certain degree. It can't compare. In other words, if I was to compare the piece we did last year to this piece, I don't think there's any comparison in terms of what it holds for an audience.